to Venture Daily. Unless you're listening on Apple Podcasts right now, something might look very, very different about what you're seeing on screen.
That's right. You can see our faces for the first time. Venture Daily is not an audio-only show. I wanted to pull up a little graphic here. So
Yeah, do it.
everything you're seeing right now is live. My name is Josiah Simons.
I'm Jackson Fordyce, and we haven't released an episode for Venture Daily in 462 days. 462 days since we did our last show, because we used to do the show every single weekday starting in June of 2023, but it was audio only. Same idea, Venture Daily or Venture News every single day, startups, tech, business, bringing on 2 or 3 guests every episode, but it was audio only. Did about 100 episodes or so.
Right.
Only audio.
Yeah. So for a quick breakdown, for anyone watching this that doesn't know what Venture Daily is, you're listening to the first time. We used to do a show every single weekday. It was a grind. We would get 3 of the top stories in tech. We'd tell you guys about them in as quick as we could without, losing any of the details. But we'd also, because Jackson and I, we are no experts.
Yeah.
We wanted to call the people who are experts. So we'd call up VCs, founders, investors, and we get their take, their insight on those news stories. We'd gather up all of that media, cut it all together every single night.
Yep.
We were up very late doing it.
Yeah, the schedule was 8 a.m. to 4 a.m. every single day, basically. Just I got the 4 a.m. shift.
I did. Yeah. And it was a grind. And so after like 6 months of doing this and over 100 episodes, over I think 200 VCs and founders came on our show. We were like, all right, it's time to go do other things.
Yeah. So we built out Demo Day, which is our venture capital and startup focused media company. We went all around the country filming with the best founders and venture capitalists in the country. And it was the most fun thing in the entire world. But I feel like now is such a great time to come back to kind of our roots, doing Demo Day, doing Venture Daily.
Yes.
Every single day. And I apologize if you're watching on or listening to Apple Podcasts or just the audio only version of this, because I'm about to show you something, a really cool hype video that we built for the launch of Venture Daily 2.0.
That's right.
Let's check it out. I'm Jackson Fordyce.
I'm Josiah Simons.
And this is Venture Daily. Yeah, pretty exciting. I think it's super fun. And like one more thing, like we're not publishing this live, but basically everything we're doing here is live. It's just me and Josiah in this room. Josiah, I wish you could see the setup that we have right now. Josiah's on the switcher. And so everything that you see and hear right now is just us two. So if there's any mistakes along the way, we apologize. We're going to get cleaned up with it. We're going to be much, much better at it. But for right now, this is the first time we're using our Rodecaster video, and Josiah's producer, host, switcher. He's doing a little of everything right now.
Yes, every switch you have seen so far has been live, me doing it on my switcher. I've never used a switcher before, so please bear with us. But yeah, just so you guys kind of get an idea, we want to put this show out every single morning. This show we're not putting out early because it's the first one, and we're just going to do a big overview, and we'll get to that. But every episode of Venture Daily from here on out is going to be first thing you hear in the morning, 10, 15 minutes. We want it to be tight. We want it to be great. And so we thought the only way we can do that is by cutting down all the editing time that happens after we film the show.
Yep.
Because that was our problem with the audio only version. It just took so long to edit every single thing perfectly and then put it out. So we thought, let's do it in one take. Mm-hmm. So we've got all of our monitors set up here, all the switchers, and it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, it'll be tough. But if you are a podcast producer and you like this kind of stuff and you're in Austin, Texas, email us, reach out to us.
Let us know
and see if you'd be down to be with us early morning, 7 a.m. every weekday.
Obviously, the plan is to eventually have this be a full-on podcast studio, and we're in a friend's house right now, which is great for him.
We do have a studio, though, that we're going to be at next week, most likely. And then moving on in the future will be somewhere really cool that we'll announce next week, but that's the plan right now.
But the plan is to be full-on podcast eventually, but right now it's just a 2-man show. Mm-hmm. So please just forgive us for all the mistakes that will probably happen in the show. But let's get to it.
Yeah, for today's show, it's like Josiah said, it's primarily a wrap up of basically what's happened since we've been gone this last year and a half. And there's 3 big stories that we're going to cover. The first is going to be politics. We had an election. Defense, the hottest investment sector that no one expected. And of course, AI, which feels like it's transforming every single day.
Yeah. And before we jump in, I want to just give a quick word about our sponsor, Public.
Our favorite sponsor in the entire world.
That's right. Public. If you take investing seriously, you need to know about public.com. That's where you can invest in everything: stocks, options, bonds, crypto. You can even earn some of the highest yields in the industry, like the 7% or higher yield you can lock in with a bond account, Jackson. Public is a FINRA registered, SIPC insured platform that takes your investments as seriously as you do. Fund your account in 5 minutes or less at public.com/venture and get up to $10,000 when you transfer your old portfolio.
10 bands.
Paid for by Public Investing. Full disclosures in our podcast description below. Check those out. And go check out our link that we have in the description below, public.com/venture. That's right. We've made it.
That's so fun. Getting your own like URL to sign up for something.
This is like the first time we've ever had that. So
We're like little kids.
Honestly, it's super exciting. And we appreciate Public for being a sponsor on the show. I love the app. Go check out our link, public.com/venture.
Let them know who sent you.
Let them know who sent you. The Venture guys at Venture Daily.
Yep.
All right. Back to the show.
Back to the show. So the biggest headline, obviously, in 2024, Donald Trump won the election. He beat Kamala Harris with 312 electoral votes to her 226 votes, making him the first U.S. president since Grover Cleveland to serve non-consecutive terms.
That's right. And with Trump back in the White House, the relationship between tech and politics is complicated. Some of the biggest names in tech have gone full red pill, as you probably all know. Elon Musk dropped over $240 million into the 2024 election, becoming by far the most generous donor in the game.
Yeah, definitely. And at Trump's inauguration, you had Musk, Zuck, Bezos, and Sundar Pichai all sitting front row. And although Trump was reelected president in November, it seems like these leaders knew it was going to happen months before a single vote was counted, as they subtly and sometimes not very subtly appeared to be publicly drifting their political postures towards moderacy, or even sometimes, in some cases, like loud conservatism.
Right.
Posting memes, being guests on right-wing podcasts, and a few trips to D.C. Tech didn't just donate, it campaigned and even positioned this election cycle, and that's why I invited Bradley Tusk to join Venture Daily to ask him about this development.
I'm Bradley Tusk. I am the CEO of Tusk Ventures.
Here's what I asked Bradley. Did November mark a turning point in how Silicon Valley plays the political game? And if so, is a cozier relationship between tech leaders and POTUS something we should expect to see going forward?
No, not really. I mean, look, I think what you had is a handful of tech leaders, Mark Andreessen, Elon Musk, David Sachs, Chamath, all these people who, are very conservative and support Trump. And by the way, Peter Thiel. And there's that makes sense, right? There's lots of people in America on different sides of the aisle and spectrum, and people should support whatever candidate works for them. I think because it was Trump, and because tech was assumed to always be kind of liberal and Democrat, that narrative became exciting to reporters, and they made a really big deal about it. And obviously, Elon Musk has been extremely empowered, and Doge has had a huge impact on the first couple of months. But overall, you're always going to have some people who line up with one party, some with the other. Maybe the more notable thing is the giant tech companies, the Metas, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Apples, who didn't support either candidate in the election itself, but knew that it was too close to call. And as a result, maintained relationships on both sides. And then when Trump won, knowing that what Trump needs is obsequience, fealty, donations, all of that, they were willing to get down on bended knee because that advanced their agenda. But by the way, those same companies had really close relationships with Obama when he was president. And so they're going to go wherever the power is to protect themselves.
Yeah, so it's like whoever won, I'm going to bow to you. So in this case, it was Donaldo.
Right.
They were like, you won, so I'm going to give you all the money in the world or all the support in the world, basically.
Basically, Bradley's saying this is not a new thing.
Yeah.
It feels like a new thing because it always does. Every 4 years we have an election, and we kind of forget that this kind of happens every single election cycle.
Yeah, it feels like a consequential shift has taken place in America's conscience regarding tech. the image that comes to all of our minds of Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg today is dramatically different than it was only a couple of years ago. I mean, both of them now do jujitsu and all that wrestling stuff, but
Right.
many now associate tech at large with the values of pro-America, anti-authority, and anti-woke. And I invited Tyler Norwood on the show to get his take.
What's up? My name is Tyler Norwood. I am a general partner here at Antler in the US.
And so I asked Tyler this question: are we witnessing a new American political class rise in the form of techno-optimism?
It's a great question. I would say broadly, yes. I think there is a new, quite interesting coalition of people who traditionally didn't have organized voting bloc that's starting to piece itself together. You could see that in the previous election, right? Like the voting blocks that voted in the previous election were very different from what we had seen previously. So I do think there's a shift. I think it's worth mentioning that I don't think Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or sort of any of the current sort of tech primes are the right people to lead this movement. And then I think with any movement, right, the next step is really having some sort of leadership that can articulate what are the values of this voting bloc and what do we care about and how does that align with all the different diverse groups who are a part of it. I mean, the next election I think will be interesting because both parties are going to have to reset. Trump can't run again, and the Democrats have to bring the next generation of Democratic leadership to the table. So I think what happens in the next election will be a much better indicator of where politics are shifting.
Now, Josiah, what I thought was interesting about that answer was that I asked Bradley the exact same question. Tyler's a VC in Austin, Bradley's a VC in New York, and see if you notice a difference in how they answer the question of, are we witnessing a new American political class rise in the form of techno-optimism?
Maybe, but again, I think it's one of these things that has very few real people, but a lot of media who gets excited about it and writes about it, so it magnifies the visibility of it. Yeah, look, there are people who are techno-optimists. I am one of them in many ways, who are also Republicans and Trump supporters. And that is a segment, but I suspect it's much more vocal in terms of the attention that it gets and maybe the money that it can raise than as an actual voting bloc itself.
So, I mean, I don't know. I feel like, actually, I don't know what I feel. I feel like while tech's top brass is cozying up to Trump, and reshaping the political map, their employees, I feel like, aren't super excited about this whole process. And I think we've seen that in so many of these news articles. I mean, yeah, this one with the LA Times, right?
Right. Yeah. I think Bradley's right. It's more of a fun point to make for people like us, the newscasters, the journalists of the world. It's more kind of our world. Uh-huh. It's not necessarily in reality that, this is some brand new thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And inside these companies, if you go back to the LA Times article thing real quick, there's a growing backlash. Workers are pushing back against what they're calling this red wave coming from the C-suite.
Yeah, but this alignment between Trump and top tech primes isn't just vibes. We've noticed that. It's policy. Trump has ramped up tariffs again, up to 145% on some Chinese imports. China hit back with its own recently, 125% tariffs on U.S. goods.
Yeah, and markets took a hit on that, mainly small businesses, especially those relying on Chinese supply chains, have been getting hammered. Even Walmart, they warn consumers to expect higher prices on everything from electronics to clothing, or people they rely heavily on Walmart to make their families stay alive. The global trade policy has seen significant volatility in the last few months due to a rapidly fluctuating tariff policy from President Trump. And the U.S. and China have recently agreed to a 90-day truce on aggressive tariffs, but it feels like we're one Trump Truth Social post away from a full-blown trade war with China. And so I asked Bradley, are startups ready for that? Are you seeing founders proactively reshoring supply chains and diversifying away from China?
Yeah, startups are not ready for it. Now, look, most startups are not making physical products, right? Most startups make software, in which case they don't really need raw materials from China and they're not impacted by the tariffs in that way. But you do have startups that make hardware of some kind, and some of them do rely on raw materials from China. And so they're impacted by it for sure. And by and large, are they ready for it? No, not really. And you have also a lot of startups that support e-commerce in various ways. And while their specific, payment technology or whatever it is might not be impacted by the tariffs, if the ultimate cost of the products that are being sold are increased significantly because those products are, that's going to come back and hurt them. And then beyond that, the other thing is, I think one of the things that the tech community was hoping for, especially those who supported Trump, was that after 3 years of absolutely no liquidity at all, 2025 would be the year that the market would open up, that IPOs would happen, that M&A would happen, and that VCs would finally start getting returns and be able to distribute money back to LPs and be able to make carry. And none of that is happening. And one of the reasons why is the tariff war overall has created so much uncertainty and chaos in the markets that markets don't like unpredictability.
I love that Bradley is in a podcast studio doing this. So we've got a great mic. Anyone who's an audio listener is probably going to notice that, and anyone on video is going to see that he's in that studio in New York.
Yeah. And like to finish up our segment on the chaotic political news over the last few months, I mean, I understand like I talked to Bradley about this new age of economic nationalism. And so over the past year, we've seen the return of tariffs, export bans, and industrial subsidies. And it seems like tech has finally entered this age of economic nationalism. And so I asked Bradley if he thought that was the case. And if so, how does that change what gets funded?
Yeah. I mean, I think that normally speaking, let me take a step back. Normally speaking, VCs significantly underweight the impact of politics and regulation upon their startups. The reason I have a business is because I have the ability to properly assess it and then potentially change it to whatever the investments I make might need. But so in general, VCs misunderstand regulatory risk. And then now that we're in a world of economic nationalism on top of that, I think now they finally see it and they understand it, but there's still a misapprehension because the human instinct is when we say the word politics is that your mind immediately goes to Washington. So you have a mental image of the White House or the Capitol or wherever it is. 80% of startups are still fundamentally regulated by state and local government, not the federal government. Yes, crypto is a federal thing. Yes, overall markets and trade policies and everything else have an impact for sure. But fundamentally, your regulator for whatever it is much more likely to be someone at the state or municipal level. And so you have all these people now talking endlessly about what's happening in Washington and trying to sound smart about it. And the reality is you're generally missing the point because those aren't the people you need to worry about.
Appreciate Bradley for coming on the show, giving that insight. And
as always,
as always, the funny thing about Bradley, when we first did Venture Daily in June of 2023, Bradley was the first guest that we recorded with.
That's right.
And that funny story, I'll say it really quickly. I was in a parked car 6 a.m. outside of Denver, Colorado, in freezing cold, and it was a Saturday. Bradley agreed to take the recording and come on the show. And then for our first episode back from Venture Daily, Bradley was also the very first person we filmed with.
Yeah.
Full circle moment.
Yeah. And the next time, when we go to virtual reality for the third version of Venture Daily, he'll be our first guest.
It'll be Bradley. All right. Let's talk defense tech. VCs poured $3 billion into defense tech startups in 2024 alone. That's an 11% jump year over year.
Yeah, and it's not just dollars. The Pentagon's finally acting like it wants to work with startups. They're streamlining procurement, prioritizing software, drones, AI, not just big iron contracts like usual.
Yeah, Josiah, VCs have historically been hesitant to invest in defense tech, and I was wondering what changed this past year, so I called Ross Fubini.
I'm Ross Fubini, and I'm the founder and managing partner of XYZ Venture Capital.
And I asked Ross that question. What changed in the past year that suddenly made defense tech one of the hottest categories in venture?
It's really three things that changed. The first was that people saw they could make money, and that was a result of Palantir going public and the traction that folks later saw from businesses like Antler. So money came from venture capitalists. The second thing that happened was really the Ukrainian war. And what that meant was engineers felt a passion for the mission and saw that these were solutions that should exist in the world. And then the third thing has come as customers, particularly from the government, have been able to willing to buy more. But if you get that combination, hey, this is one of the largest spends in the entire world, and now there are people that want to build businesses here. Venture people think they can make money. It's going to make for a hot category.
I feel like whenever we were doing Venture Daily back in 2023 and 2024, there were no stories about anything regarding defense tech or funding going towards defense tech. The only story I actually remember is Booz Allen Hamilton starting up their own like venture arm of like $50 million or something like that. But other than that, I don't remember any stories around that. So I feel like just now every day there's a whole new, defense tech company getting funding or some fund saying like, hey, we're having like now this defense tech arm of our firm that we're going to be focusing on now. And so it's so funny to see like how things change over this last year.
And I appreciate Ross breaking it down really easy for us. Three things, and I think probably the biggest one, a war broke out in recent times, and so you're just going to see more spend on defense. Yeah,
and I also called Greg Bernstein, co-founder and CEO of at the New Industrial Corporation, to ask him about defense. I thought he had an interesting perspective on what changed in the past year that suddenly made defense tech so hot.
And the obvious ones are obviously the continued rise of armed conflict, but I think it's more than that. It's the initial instantiation of deep tech. It was like, okay, cool, deep tech into the industrial base. What do you use that for? And generally, like, it could be as much as, the lethal component of defense tech as well as the deterrence component. So when I think defense plus the industrial base come together, it's that convergence component here, which is I think the big part of what's driving it.
Just like over the past year, the Department of Defense has acted more like a top-tier VC, deploying capital fast, courting startups, and even rewriting procurement rules. And I asked Ross what he thinks caused this new eagerness in the DoD to partner with startups, and if he believes the DoD is becoming one of the most important backers of frontier tech.
It's really, the government has always had a desire for the best products for the warfighter. I think the defense industry didn't know how to buy those products, and we're slowly teaching it by the work that Palantir has done in shaping regulation, by the work that Anduril and Turbine One and CAPE have done by making products that the Defense Department can just love. And then the rules are really getting accelerated under the current administration.
Funny thing about Ross, real quick, all right, we'll go to his clip in a second, but you can see like underneath his XYZ jacket, you can see his Forterra, I think sweater jacket. So he's like double defensed up right now. He picks favorites.
We were talking about the election a minute ago. I feel like I've heard some quiet and then sometimes not so quiet whispers from defense founders that they were not unpleased when Trump was elected.
I don't hate it.
They didn't hate it. And there was this general feeling that Trump would open up a lot more opportunities for government contracts.
Yeah, I've heard that too. And like, I actually asked Greg if he thought that like candidly, like a lot of defense founders breathed a sigh of relief. Did they really when Trump was elected? And here's what he had to say.
I don't know, man. I think people, I mean, sure, yes, in certain pockets, no question. But I think people generally love the United States. I think people, particularly working in this space, do believe in Pax Americana. I think that there's that component. I think the Trump administration represents that more than the Biden administration did, and certainly more than the Democrats have in quite some time. But I think Pax Americana all up is more of the direction that I think people in that community feel. I think a lot of them, if you confront them with like, are they nonpartisan? They just want to solve problems for America. They're like, yes, absolutely. If you're like, cool, are you a Republican or are you just focused on solving problems for America? They're like, no, I'm focused on solving problems for America. So that's my sense.
I didn't want to sound like dumb on the show whenever I was recording with Greg, but he said Pax Americana a couple of times. I was like, oh, for sure. Like, I've heard that phrase.
Of course.
I think I still now like don't know fully do you know what it is?
I believe it means peace in America.
Really?
Talking about the time. So talking about World War II happened. We haven't had a hot war really that we've been involved in.
The long peace.
On our soil of any kind. I guess World War II wasn't on our soil either though. So I don't know.
Well, when I hear Pax Americana, I think of Michelle Voles that used to be at A16, and she now started her new fund, Pax Americana. That's like the most immediate thing I went to in my head now. But now knowing long peace, what is peace in our time?
Peace in our time, right?
Peace in our time.
We do work with a lot of founders who remind me of Tony Stark, so it makes a lot of sense.
Shout out Dan.
Well, the spotlight on defense makes sense when considering the multiple conflicts happening around the world in Ukraine and Gaza. There's geopolitical pressure for the U.S. to invest in our own defense, especially with China's power growing. You know this, of course, Jackson. We've seen the U.S. leaning hard on private innovation to stay ahead. It's no longer just Lockheed and Raytheon, though. Now it's Anduril, Shield AI, and a swarm of younger players.
Yeah, the Pentagon is certainly handing out checks. Being one of the companies that receives one is not necessarily easy, though. And so I asked Greg about that. If you're a founder entering defense right now, what's the most important thing you need to understand about selling to the Pentagon?
I think there's an increasingly important focus on both getting to scale and understanding the nature of what that actually means, which is raising capital to start with, having a prototype, but then saying, okay, if I get that coveted order that I want, and that order then relates to what I have to produce on a timeline, how am I actually going to do that? Bit of a self-serving answer given what the new industrial corporation does. But I think that's increasingly not just important. It is the whole point. It's like you're not producing a piece of software that you can immediately put out into out into the world. In some cases you are, but in a lot of the hardware startups that are wanting to sell, or even software companies that are looking to do that immediate, that ground of like, I have a great idea and I have somebody on the other side of it that wants to buy it. That middle ground is the difference between working on it for another 20 years and having a great outcome, and probably looking for your next startup in 18 months or so.
And I also asked Ross the exact same question: how best to sell to the Pentagon? And I loved his answer.
Don't build another Anduril. Build your own unique. We get pitched all the time. We're going to be another Anduril. We're going to be another Anduril. There's one Anduril. But if you make a product that's truly amazing, and you go have a capture team, a sales team that can penetrate the government, you can be successful.
Bars from Ross Fubini.
That's
thanks.
right.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Thanks, Greg, for coming on the show. We really appreciate y'all's insights around defense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Final segment for the day.
Final segment for the day, for the roundup, of course, has to be none other than AI. Still the hottest space in tech by far, but the narrative is shifting. 2023 was all about jaw-dropping demos. 2024 and 2025, it's about making money, finally.
Right.
Or hopefully.
Hopefully. Some AI startups actually are, though.
Yep.
It feels like every day a new AI startup is hitting 100, or not 100, 1 million MRR, or at least that's what LinkedIn wants me to think.
Yeah, true, but 74% of companies using AI, like according to, what's that, BCG? Yeah, exactly, that BCG study, or the, what is it?
Yes,
Not a
yeah,
study.
it's a study.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. They still struggle to scale value. Like the tech works, but the operational lift is real. And for costs, talent gaps, integration headaches, it's not plug and play.
Right.
And I wanted to get Lily Lyman's take on this, so I invited her onto the show.
I'm Lily Lyman. I'm at Underscore VC, which is an early stage community driven venture firm based here in Boston.
Nice, Lily. So are AI companies going to start actually making money, or are we still in the hope and GPU burn phase?
When you talk about AI companies, you got to sort of sub-segment them. There's different types of them. I'd say at the application layer, we are seeing real revenue, and we're seeing in some cases explosive revenue. You read these headlines of things like Lovable and Cursor and Windsurf, and like what are their paths to incredible revenue growth. And I think some of that is extremely real. As I mentioned, I think some of that revenue is sort of experimental revenue, and I think we will see churn in the coming months. And so, that's something that we're noticing our friends who are Series A investors spending a lot more time digging into what's real, what's not. What are the product upsells and adoptions that are happening? What are the renewals that are happening? What does churn look like? Because it's actually, it's never been easier to start a company. It's never been easier to get a product live in the hands of paying customers, which at the seed stage as an investor, that used to be sort of the barrier for like, oh, can this team execute? That's not that hard anymore. And so what we're really looking for is like, what is deeper adoption? What does real usage look like? What does real product expansion look like?
Experimental revenue. That I wish we had a picture of the Steve Carell from The Big Short. It's like there's a bubble. Experimental revenue.
Right.
We have revenue in theory, but not in practice.
Yeah. Is it true? Is it true in practice?
Yeah.
But
it's not true in theory.
Not true in theory, right. Policy-wise, America's still leading the race, though. 73% of all LLMs are U.S.-based. Mm-hmm. So we've got a regulatory patchwork, however, with states and cities making up their own rules. Meanwhile, China and the EU are moving fast with more centralized frameworks.
Yep. And while the U.S. has taken a hands-off approach to AI, Europe's been passing sweeping regulations, and China has already implemented tight controls. Meanwhile, American model companies have been pushing for a national AI policy that would effectively lock in their lead ahead of competitors. And I was wondering what kind of regulatory capture this might be leading us towards. So I invited Mark Fiorentino on the show to talk about it.
My name is Mark Fiorentino. I'm a partner on and I co-lead our growth team at BCV.
So I asked Mark, is AI heading toward a world of regulatory capture?
It's a great question. Naturally, the quicker something becomes a ubiquitous tool, the more regulation you have around it, right? And I think the answer is most likely yes. We are going to enter into more of a regulatory controlled environment as AI becomes more ubiquitous. And what does that mean from an opportunity perspective? I think managed infrared cybersecurity is one of the more interesting categories, and we have a couple folks on our team that are specialized in that. And so I think it's one of the most interesting pockets of capital allocation right now. And I think that to me is the biggest. Like you said, what do we do with it? That's I think the most interesting part of it.
For one final note about AI and how it's transforming our lives, I asked none other than the GOAT, Tyler Norwood, back on the show.
Back on the show.
why he thinks AI is not just hype or a fad.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I have a very clear answer to this. It's like my personal usage and the usage of my wife specifically. So my personal usage is kind of like, I think I represent ultimately a very small slice of the population because like I work in tech, I work in venture capital. And so I always try to be careful of like what I think about the world and the way that I use products is not a good indication of like whether or not this will be adopted like broadly. Seeing my wife start to use like ChatGPT on a regular basis is really opening my eyes to like I really think we're in like the first inning, the first pitch. Because like my wife doesn't work in technology. Like my wife works in banking and lending, right? And she is a mother, and I think she much better represents the average American from like a technology adoption perspective than I do. If you talk about product market fit, like I've reached a point and I see my wife reaching a point where like if you took generative AI away, it would harm my quality of life. Like I'm using it that regularly and my wife is using it that regularly. And that to me is like serious sticking power. Who wins in that market? Still unclear. Like that's up to the players in the market, but the demand for generative AI as a life co-pilot that can talk to you about any topic, I think the demand is very clear and it is very sticky. And I think it will only continue to grow.
I like the way Tyler's thinking because I agree. I mean, my wife has not yet really been into ChatGPT, but whenever she needs something, whenever she wants to write something, she hits me with the ChatGPT. I'm like, wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I like how he said first inning, first pitch.
You're
like
right.
extremely, extremely early. I feel like so many people on X I see say, like, if you haven't started learning how to vibe code, bro, it's over.
You're right.
If you're 27, it's over.
And it's not over.
No,
It is not over.
According to Tyler Norwood, first inning,
inning,
first pitch.
How many games have I seen where the last pitch was the ball game?
What does the last pitch look like then in AI? That should be a question we ask
That
the
is a
next
question.
person. We ask Tyler. All right, you said this is first pitch, first inning. What does last pitch, last inning look like?
All right. So that's the whole past year in tech. We were gone for 462 days. We're back now, but we wanted to give you guys just like a year in tech from some of our favorite VCs joining the show. Thanks so much. Obviously, this show is much longer than we typically be twice
a
as long.
little way too long because we kind of go between 10 to 15 minutes, and this probably be around
This is gonna be
35 minutes.
Yeah. So apologies for that, but thanks for bearing with us. If you're still watching to the end, we appreciate you.
Yep. And, we are just getting started. We really appreciate y'all tuning in. Hit subscribe, drop a review if you're a founder or an investor. We would love for you to come onto our show, give insights to our audience. Wednesday, right? Wednesday, we have a great show headed your way with the 3 biggest stories in tech, startups, venture capital, business, finance, etc. We'll be joined by some of the most amazing guests you'll ever see, as we always are. We'll see you Wednesday morning on Venture Daily.